So today we're going to talk about piecewise functions. Most online definitions you find will probably be along the lines of a function that is defined on a sequence of intervals. The simpler definition we came up with was a function that contains two or more other functions. Essentially, these could contain any number of functions. These include exponential, linear, quadratic, etc. There are a couple things you should know beforehand. These include transformations, parent functions, domain restrictions, open versus closed circle. Also, in order for functions to have the same y value, only one function's point can be inclusive, while the others are exclusive, or all of them can be exclusive. The first function of f(x) is x minus 3, with a domain of negative infinity to negative 3 exclusive. The second expression is x plus 3, with a domain of negative 3 inclusive to positive infinity. Remember, negative and positive infinity are always exclusive values. Both equations are linear. For the first function, the graph has a y-intercept of negative 3 and a slope of 1. The second graph has a y-intercept of 3 and a slope of 1. Graph both functions. Notice the overlapping y values. One is inclusive while the other is exclusive. The first function of f of x is negative x minus 8, with a domain restriction of negative 9 inclusive to negative 3 inclusive. The second expression is negative x squared plus 4, with a domain restriction of negative 3 exclusive to 3 inclusive. Notice the transformations with a reflection over the x-axis and a shift up 4 units. The last expression is 4, with a domain restriction of 3 exclusive and 7 inclusive. Graph all three functions.
Find the equation to each line. One line is y equals 2x plus 4. You can determine the domain restriction by looking at the line's endpoints. This line's domain restriction is negative infinity to negative 1 inclusive. The next line is y equals negative 1 with a domain restriction of negative 1 exclusive to 3 exclusive. The next line is y equals negative 1/3 x with a domain restriction of 3 inclusive to 9 inclusive. Write as a function of f of x. Find the equations to each line. One line is y equals 1. You can determine the domain restriction by looking at the endpoints. In this example, the domain is written with inequality signs. The domain restriction of y equals 1 is x is less than negative 1. The next line is quadratic, y equals x squared minus 3, with a domain restriction of negative 1 is less than or equal to x. Write as a function of f of x. Remember, when finding the domain restriction, you may find it easier to find interval notation first and then convert it with inequality signs.